Good afternoon. This is Jim Whitehead of All Power Group, and today we're going to function in my channel called Power Coffee News. Just so that you know, I have been, besides a generator company, and that was what I did mainly, but I also started a coffee roasting business in 2018. Over in Davie, Florida. When we moved here to Naples, well, that ended the coffee business. But I'm working on it again because coffee is wonderful. So, anyway, today we're going to talk about what's happening in the world of coffee. Coffee prices surge in 2025 as climate change and U.S. tariffs create a perfect storm. The cost of a daily cup of coffee is on the rise in 2025, driven by a dual assault of climate change-induced supply shortages and newly imposed United States tariffs on imported coffee beans. Related to Brazil and also India, the tariffs are up to 50%. So, and we can debate all day, and people in the administration try to tell you that it's a tax on those that are shipping the coffee or the country that's growing the coffee. Well, that's not true. Tariffs are a tax, in so many words, when the coffee comes in this case, to the United States. So if Joe, the coffee supplier, where coffee's coming in from different parts of the world, he or she or that company is the one that has to pay, in this case, if it's from Brazil or India, 50% more. So the whole point is recognizing that they're not probably going to eat that 50% increase. So the recognition is, as coffee drinkers, coffee producers, are going to pay more. That's just the way it is. You know, there's no point in debating it. And the interesting thing with tariffs, I don't mean to go off on this a little bit, but after, with the stock in 1929, you know, there was a point of saying, ooh, what are we going to do to kind of help the economy? So they actually, in I think 1930, they said, well, we're going to do tariffs. Exact same tariffs that we have now in the sense of the formula or what they are. And guess what? It basically made the Great Depression worse. So, you know, there's a saying that we all try to remember. History repeats itself. So here we are. For some reason, the administration thought tariffs are going to be great. Maybe for them. Who knows what they're doing with the money? Yes, a lot of money's coming into the Treasury. But I don't really feel comfortable, and it didn't need to be that way. We're paying enough for things, and things are going up every day. Anyway, this combination of environmental and political measures is squeezing the global coffee market with significant consequences for both consumers and the industry. Coffee growing areas. And here is just a depiction of a kind of volatile graph that just shows what's happening, and it kind of encompasses some of the things that are happening that are causing some problems, climate change, things like that. Anyway, coffee growing areas, as you probably have seen this before, this is called the bean belt. It's a line used as just where around that line, and that's the equator, around that line, both north and south, whatever countries it goes through, that's the main coffee growing areas. And, the growing areas, Central America, South America, East Africa, West and Central Africa, Southwest Asia, India, Papua New Guinea, Australia. The interesting, by doing this presentation, I didn't know Australia actually was a coffee producer, and it's relatively new, and I love Australia. I use a lot of road products, RODE, and they're in Australia, and they're good people, really good people. Anyway, the current retail price of roasted coffee beans varies depending on the origin and the brand, but consumers are seeing a general upward trend. Commodity market data for unroasted green beans reflects the volatility, with prices experiencing significant fluctuations. By the way, this is not in my prepared presentation, but somebody said, "Oh, I have instant coffee, or I buy ground coffee, or I buy roasted beans." And so somebody say, how does that affect? They all get affected. Some of it where you'd say, well, my instant coffee hasn't gone up. Well, that's maybe because they produced a significant amount related to the upcoming tariffs. So what happens is, if, let's say, Nescafe is keeping their price steady, it's probably because they produced a lot at the lower prices. But as soon as they need to bring more coffee in, and there's tariffs in general, but the worst, of course, Brazil and India. And the reason why, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to turn this political, but you got to tell the whole story in a way. The reason India is at 50% is because the Trump administration is angry at India, because India is buying oil from Russia. And related to Brazil, he was unhappy with what Brazil has been doing. So instead of it being a logical cost factor experiment, they just say, I'm angry at that country, so I'm going to raise tariffs. Well, so far, tariffs have not done anything good, and they won't. That's the thing we all have to recognize, is tariffs are not going to make this country well off again. Wherever that money goes as to in the collection of tariffs, it certainly isn't getting out to the American people. So, anyway, I'll say no more. I don't want to get too crazy on this. This price instability is largely attributable to two key factors: the increasing impact of climate change. If that doesn't kind of personify what I'm saying, the climate change on coffee growing regions, and a recent shift in U.S. trade policy. The 1.5 is, and one would say, how does climate change? And again, I'm not trying to get too much into this for your sake, but there are two main coffee beans. One is Arabica. Those are the best beans, the most expensive, and Robusta. Robusta is not bad. It's, if you roast it and consume it, probably the coffee is going to be a little bitter. That said, Robusta has more caffeine. So you have to make a choice. If you want to do Robusta, the beans are cheaper, and you get a much more caffeine than Arabica. But the big point I'm saying is Arabica mainly are grown at higher altitudes, 3,000, 5,000, et cetera, et cetera. And because of climate change, let's say Joe, the farmer, God bless these farmers, but let's say he used to replant his Arabica at, let's say, 4,000 feet. And everything was fine for quite a while. And then as we've had our climate change, that temperature aspect is where he may now only be able to grow Arabica at 5,000 square feet. Now, no farmer would have unlimited land that's high. So if he was doing fine, when we weren't having much of a temperature issue, he'd be growing enough coffee. But if all of a sudden 1,000 feet of his land going up a hill is not suitable for growing Arabica coffee beans, they right there say, well, I used to do 28,000 bushels. I'm using just a term that you'd understand what I'm trying to get at. But bottom line, he now, because he's lost 1,000 feet on his land, he's not going to be able to grow and produce as much coffee. That's just the way it is. Now, talking a little bit more about climate change. Climate change squeezes global coffee supply. Just what I said. Climate change is no longer a future threat to coffee production. It is a present and escalating reality. Key coffee growing regions around the world are grappling with extreme and unpredictable weather patterns that are severely hammering crop yields and quality. Now, I started to say earlier, being a roaster, you'd say, well, what's my best choice here with my own coffee? If you are able, and please, I am here to help you. If you say, hey, I've been wanting to start a coffee business, or I've been wanting to experiment with roasting my own beans. Now, the neatest thing is, when you're buying coffees, in so many words, the cheapest level of coffee is when they're green. They've been processed, but they're green, and you certainly can't use them for coffee at that point. But in essence, you can get them a little cheaper. I use a company called Genuine Origin, and I would buy 65-pound bags of green coffee from all over the world. Sumatra, my favorite, by the way, were coffee beans from Ethiopia, Yurgashef region. So if you buy the beans, and there are inexpensive coffee roasters. You can even do it with a popcorn popper, which I don't recommend, but you can. Or you can literally put them in a pan, like a cast iron pan, and roast them that way by just keep moving them, move them until they're at the color that would make sense, where you say, yeah, I like a medium roast, I like a light roast, I like a dark roast. Very, very easy, because they have charts that say, okay, this is the color of a dark roast, this is the color of a medium dose, and that's, the color of a light roast. So you can, buy a quantity of coffee and basically roast it yourself. And you will enjoy it, believe it or not. And in the long run, honestly, you will save money. Because if you bought, let's say, 65 pounds of a good coffee, green coffee, and it comes in a protected, sealed bag or sack, I guess you might say, and you keep it in like an air-conditioned. You don't put it in your garage when it's 100 degrees. No, you need to keep them in a relatively cool place. Now that could be in a closet. It isn't where, oh no, there's going to be a special coffee closet. No, it's just making sure that the temperature is not abnormal, et cetera, et cetera. So you buy the coffee cheaper. Some of the equipment you can buy is not expensive, and you roast your own, and you roast it when you need it. In a couple of my other presentations, there are containers that you use to store your coffee after you've roasted them, because when roasted coffee gives off nitrogen, and that will happen for about 3-4 days. So what happens is when you roast your coffee, you cool it immediately. And then you put it in one of these one-way valve containers. They're not expensive. And you have to expect that for about 3 to 4 days, that coffee has to kind of sit there. And what it does is air or oxygen doesn't get into the beans, because that will hasten the staleability of the coffee, but nitrogen that is given off continues to give off for a while after you've roasted the beans, that can get out. So you fill whatever you're doing your coffee, and then you basically put them away and just fill it when you need them. And that would be honestly the most rewarding and the cheapest. Because again, I know you'd say, but you got to buy the equipment. Yes, but the home roasters are not that expensive. And the fact that you will be saving money in the long run, because you can buy a larger quantity of coffee, keep it protected, roast it when you know you're going to need some more coffee, keep them in the container so that they rest and give off the nitrogen gas, and then they're pretty good for about 2 weeks from that point. Now, if you go 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5, no, it doesn't make any difference. It's not going to be where anything's going to hurt you. But the recognition that you try to maybe roast only enough beans for a couple weeks. And then when you're getting close to the end of that 2 weeks, you'd roast some more. And again, roasting, typically, depending on the roaster, roasting could take about 10 minutes. And it's very obvious. You can see the beans being spun around. You can kind of start smelling, what's happening. Also, they first turn a little yellow, et cetera, et cetera. And you use both time and color. And Again, you won't be tested, related to what we call cracks. If you want a light or medium roast, when you're roasting your beans at a certain temperature, probably 350, 380, you will literally hear what sounds like popcorn popping. And that's called, the first one is called first crack. So if you want a lighter roast heading toward a medium roast, that's when you would pull the beans, right after first crack. If you keep roasting them longer, you will get into what we call the second crack. A little more robust, but now the beans are heading in the direction of being burnt. So there is a fine line between a dark roast that's fine to a dark roast that you've roasted too long. I had one customer who, when he would order his beans from me, he would say, dark, 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 dark. And yeah, I had computers to manage my roasting and this and this and this and this and this. But again, getting to that second crack and going a little bit beyond that, you're getting very close to ruining the coffee. So you really have to get used to when you should pull that roast before you go into no man's land. Anyway, Brazil, the world's largest coffee producer, has been hit particularly hard by severe droughts, leading to a significant reduction in their expected harvest. Similarly, Vietnam, a major producer of Robusta beans, has also faced prolonged dry spells. Other coffee-producing nations are contending with erratic rainfall, with too much or too little water, stressing coffee plants and creating favorable conditions for diseases and pests. Now, the rising global temperatures are also forcing coffee cultivation to higher altitudes, because remember, Robusta can be grown in another presentation, but Robusta can be grown at much lower altitudes. Arabica, the best beans, are very, very, it's very, very important that they're grown at that 4,000 or 5,000 feet or higher now. So anyway, this whole thing is shrinking the available land for optimal coffee growth and increasing production costs. These climate-related disruptions are creating a fundamental imbalance between tightening global supply and consistently high demand, inevitably pushing prices upward. Now, if that is enough, again, U.S. tariffs add fuel to the fire, compounding the climate-induced supply issues. The United States has implemented new tariffs on imported coffee beans in 2025. You know, I was hoping that, and of course, probably no one in the administration drinks coffee. I'm being silly, but bottom line, or they just have so much money, it doesn't make any difference. But bottom line, the costs have gone up, and what is always a problem in the coffee arena is the fact that the farmers never get paid enough for what their coffee is. So some of these big importers might really try to even get the farmer to reduce their pricing, even though they're not good in the first place. And in some cases, there's actually reduced land to grow the trees. Or, as it said earlier, they can, because of the unusual issue, they can have pests, things that actually destroy the coffee before you've even had a chance to grow it or pick it. So anyway, a baseline tariff of 10% has been applied to most coffee imports, representing a significant new cost for the product that is overwhelmingly imported. You know, there is some coffee grown in the United States, but not very much. Hawaii has Kona coffee because they have high altitude regions where the coffee grows. Expensive, even before this whole issue of tariffs and what climate has done. Jamaica is another one. They have a Jamaican blue. Yeah, it is growing at a higher altitude, but they're expensive. I looked at when I bought I buy 5-pound bags basically now because I'm not roasting yet. But I would not even venture into either Kona Hawaiian coffee or blue coffee from Jamaica because they'd be like 6 times the price. And you would have to say, I think it's good, but I don't want to pay that extra money. The tariff structure is not uniform across all exporting nations. Notably, Brazilian and India's coffee, a cornerstone of the U.S. market, has been hit with a steep 50% tariff. I know I keep saying the same thing in a sense. Effective August of 2025. Other coffee-producing countries also face varying tariff rates, creating a complex and challenging landscape for importers and roasters. This new trade policy directly translates to higher costs for businesses that import, roast, and sell coffee in the United States. Many of these businesses, from large corporations to small independent coffee shops, are being forced to pass these increased costs on to their consumers to maintain their profit margins. I mean, it's a vicious circle because, again, if you go in and let's say you typically would go into a coffee shop and you say, all right, I usually have two coffees, relax, read, study. But because I'm paying $3 more, $2 more for that cup, I'm only going to have one instead of two. Well, that's a very straightforward economic decision where you are spending, generally in the sense of coffee, half of what you usually would do. I've been wanting to, because I roast my beans. No, I don't roast the bean now, but I will be roasting beans. But I grind them just as and that's the best thing when you're going to go make coffee, you grind them. I wanted to kind of, because I do what we call a double espresso, and I've been wanting to go where I go to a quad espresso. And I just said, that would be, and I'm not talking a lot of coffee, but I would be in essence needing to double the amount of coffee I'm grinding to make a larger cup of coffee. So it affects us all. So in conclusion, the rising cost of coffee beans in 2025 is a multifaceted issue. The long-term and escalating threat of climate change is fundamentally altering agricultural landscape for coffee, making it a more scarce and expensive commodity. This environmental crisis is now exacerbated by the immediate economic impact of the U.S. tariffs, creating a perfect storm that is being felt in the wallets of coffee drinkers across the country. So, anyway, I know I always talk a little longer than I'd like, but I really appreciate you being here. And the big point, as I said earlier, if you want to roast coffee, and again, you can go from a minimal roasting aspect to I want to build, yada, yada, yada. So it's all in between. So you can do some of your own roasting and be proud of it, save a little money, pay for the little equipment that you've purchased, and again, you will benefit in the long run. And if you get to where you want to turn it into a coffee business that I did, you have a roaster that's capable of, typically the unit I had, I could do about 26 pounds an hour. And typically coffee sold in either 12-ounce bags, pound bags, sometimes 5 pounds. But anyway, it's where, again, you can go to whatever level you want to go. And I honestly, and I'm not kidding, anytime I've said from both the generator business, solar generator business, coffee business, I'll help you. So anyway, thank you, and I'll look forward to hopefully seeing you next time. By the way, at the very bottom, that's a link to my other channel called Phoenix Animal. And I love animals, and and I love coffee. So somebody'd say, why'd you start a second channel? Because I wanted to. And the last thing I'll say is, with whatever topic you're going to do your homework on and present, you'll learn new things. Related to that, I was doing my coffee roasting in 2018, 2019. So bottom line, my getting back into coffee again, it has changed a lot. So it isn't where you'd say, yeah, I learned everything there was to know back in 2018. So now it's 2025 and same thing. No. Climate change has changed things. The equipment has changed. I can go on and on and on. They've made better things, better equipment, and it's exciting. It really is. But thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again. And please hang in there, and please support my channel if you can. It's always appreciated, or the Animal Channel. Thank you.